Hello, hello, hello. I am the Linux Mitch. I've been using computers since 1991, and I bought my first computer in the last quarter of 1991. It was an IBM clone, or otherwise known as an IBM compatible. I paid $2,000 for it. It had a colored monitor. It had a dot matrix printer, which is one of those printers that make a lot of noise. You had your paper, a box of paper that sat on the floor, and it had the paper that went up into the printer, and it had the feeder, and it fed in. And when you were printing, it made a lot of noise. And then when you're finished printing, you had to take the feeder paper off the side and carefully tear it off, and try not to tear the paper, and tear the paper feeder off on both sides. And my computer looked something like this, except it didn't have a mouse, and it came with two slots for two different types of drives. And of course, it didn't have thumb drives in those days, and it didn't even have CD-ROM drives in those days. And my monitor was a color monitor. It came with, now my computer was a 286, so it had a 40 megabyte hard drive and 1 megabyte of RAM. And this 286, when I bought it, I always buy computers that are going off the market because then the price is lower. So this computer was, they weren't making these anymore. They were going off the market. And it didn't come with Windows 3.1 because the 386s, which were a stronger computer, they were coming with Windows 3.1. So my 286 computer came with DOS. It came with a GUI application that only worked with the keyboard, and you used it to open and close programs. You used it to make new directories, to make new files, to copy files or delete files or move files around from one directory to another directory. And it came with it came with WordPerfect 5.1. That was the WordPerfect with the blue screen and the white letters. It came with Lotus 123 Release 3, which was a spreadsheet application that works in DOS. And the screen was black, and you had to know all the keyboard bindings to work around in it. And like I said, it had two drives for different types of floppies. It had a drive for this floppy, which is a 5¼ inch, and they were bendable. You could bend them really easily, and of course, if you bent it, it wouldn't work. And I used to have lots of them, and I was hoping to show you one of them, but I threw them out a while back when I was cleaning up. I wish I didn't. And it also came with this floppy drive for this discs. These discs had more memory, so you could store more applications or files on it. And these ones were hard, and you couldn't break them. I guess if you really tried, you could break it. And this is one of them here. And this is what they look like. And what I used to do is play around in DOS. So DOS back then was a lot like the terminal in Linux, the way it is now. And actually Windows also has, modern Windows that is, like Windows 10 and 11, they have what they call a PowerShell, which when you're in running Windows 10 and 11, you can open up the PowerShell. It's a terminal, and you can run commands and do things in there. And of course, most people don't. Usually only administrators do, but anyone can do it. So in this 286 computer I had, you could go into DOS, and like I said, there was a GUI application that didn't work with the mouse. It only worked with the keyboard, and you could open and close programs. You could make directories, you could delete files, make files, copy files, so forth. But you could also go into DOS and do that. And when you went into DOS, you could type in commands to make new directories, delete directories, make files, delete files, move files from one directory to another directory, just like you can do in the terminal now in Linux. And that's probably one explanation why, after I got into Linux, I fell in love with the terminal, and I enjoy doing things more in the terminal than I do in the GUI. Also, I did buy Windows 3.1 and I installed it in the computer. And it did run, but not great. It was very laggy. And some programs opened and some didn't. So I ended up taking Windows 3.1 out. Because really, Windows 3.1 was made to work with 386s, not the 286s. I had my whole computer backed up on these disks. And just for the heck of it, I used to format my hard drive and reinstall all my programs. And I did that probably at least 5 times. So that might also explain why after I got into Linux, I started distro hopping, and my hard drives I've deleted since I've been using Linux for over 3 years. I've deleted my hard drives. I can't count how many times I've deleted my hard drives and reinstalled Linux or different types of Linux because I was distro hopping. And it took me a couple years before I got into using VMs. So for the first 2 years of Linux, I didn't use VMs. So whenever I wanted to try a new distribution, I wiped out my hard drive and put a new Linux distribution in. So that explains probably why I like doing that and also why I love using the terminal. So after getting rid of that computer, I graduated to Windows 95, then Windows 98, then Windows 2000 at work. Then at home, I ended up graduating to Windows Vista, then Windows XP, and then Windows 7, Windows 10, and after Windows 10, I started using Linux. And I went, first was Linux Mint, then MX Linux, Manjaro Linux, then Arch Linux using a third-party installer. Then finally, I learned how to do Arch, to install Arch the manual way. And now Arch Linux has their own built-in installer. And I've tried some other Linux distributions as well, which I won't talk about in this video. And pretty much that is my computer experience. And of course, graduated to MS Office, when I started working and using computers at work. And that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. I am the Linux Mensch.